All right, guys. What a year in women's sports. Facts. Big facts. How would you, we're going to get right into it. Kari, how would you characterize the growth that you've seen in the last year?
Chaotic, in the best way. As I'm sure a lot of you know, especially if you touch sports, I mean, it goes back, I think, almost 100 years. You think back to when professional sports started, particularly on the men's side, and you look at where we are at the women's side, and I mean, you're starting to see the trends that are almost parallel and without any of the same investment. So 4% of, and I'm sure everyone has heard the stat, 4% of all sports coverage are of women's sports. With that being said, you're seeing similar numbers on some of the things. I mean, look at women's tennis. More people watch Serena than they did the men's final. And you're seeing that even with the NCAA tournament and you know, Erin, the basketball player over here. But I think for us at Angel City, it's been amazing to see what we've believed all along, which is that there's a market there and there's an audience. And not only that, but they're diligent and they've had to persevere to become women's sports fans, and to people will be fans of things they can see. But you have to get in front of them. So getting to see kind of buy-in from media and investors and partners and sponsors has been huge. And the last couple of years are a huge moment for that. And I think it's only going to continue to grow.
So little audience interaction here. Show of hands, who follows a women's sports team or athlete on social media? Who has consumed content, being a game in person or digitally, over the last 2 months, 3 months?
Who's been to an Angel City game?
Just watched. Yeah. Okay. That's pretty good. Yeah. That wasn't the number last year. There's more and more. The growth is palpable.
I think it's something too, and you see it kind of across the board, and I'll let Erin talk too, but particularly in the NWSL, the National Men's Soccer League, which is where we sit. I mean, I grew up playing sports. My mom's worked for the Seahawks for 30 plus years. I didn't know the league exists until I worked for this team. It's been around for 11 years. So that says something to the problem to begin with. And so kind of just understanding from the baseline up, I told the men in the room, women are just better storytellers, to be totally honest. And women athletes are better products than men. They show up on time. They are not rude.
Oh.
I'm just going to get ahead of this. They are way easier to work with. They read the contract. I mean, it's a very, very different product. And then also you think of soccer in particular, people like winners. The men's team, the men's national team, which we have, if you didn't know, has got third place in 1932 in the World Cup when there was 12 teams. That is the best they have done. The women have won 4 World Cups in the last 35 years. It's just not the same product. And so you think of people being fans, you're a fan of a player and then a team and then a league. So people know who Alex Morgan is. They know who Megan Rapinoe is. They really understand that. I can name a few of the men's teams mostly because I have to work with them in terms of particularly in soccer, but I think you're starting to see across the board. I mean, look at Caitlin Clark, look at, you know, everyone and just kind of even like Shanae Gumake and all these different players across different women's sports. Like, they're great storytellers and they're great at presenting what they stand for. Brands want to align with them. They want to partner with them. So you're getting buy-in from the players first. And I think that is the most important piece of it when you're growing the sport, whether that is from the pay equity fight from the women's national team to having CBAs and unions. All of that is kind of pushed together into this amalgam of rapid growth, more than anyone thought. And it's just been, again, it's a proof of concept. And I'm a data person, was an ex-banker. And so for somebody who loves numbers, it's been amazing to be like, oh, great, you think that no one wants to do this or watch this? Oh, we actually out-earn, this is getting recorded, so I have to be careful what I say here. I mean, we have more season ticket holders than the Clippers and the Kings and the Galaxy. And I don't know if you've been to a game this year, but we've won 1 at home. We've had 11. It's not been great, but we still sell over 20,000 tickets a game. So it's a different market. Women's sports fans are resilient. They've had to work really hard, and getting to get and build this community. It's been cool from both an investment side and also just like an overall legacy side.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, that was some word vomit.
That was amazing. So consumers, From the VC perspective now, love to see proof of consumer demand. This led Elysian Park Ventures to start Trailblazer Venture Studio. I'd love for you to share on the thought that went into that and how now they're contributing to the space.
Yeah. So, I mean, exactly what you touched on in terms of that's at like the professional level. So investment into teams and leagues, as kind of on the venture side, what we're looking at is we kind of define the space as women and sports. So this is women as athletes, women as fans, and the growth of women's sports more broadly. So we launched the Trailblazer Venture Studio in partnership with Billie Jean King, RGA, and the Los Angeles Dodgers, and of course, Elysian Park on our side. And we selected 9 companies that are all operating and creating products and services for those 3 segments. So women as fans, women as athletes, and the growth of women's sports. And so whether that's media coverage, whether that's helping athlete performance, so whether it's digital training tools, whether it's actual equipment designed for female athletes, which had long been neglected, like the footwear that I'm wearing was designed for the anatomy of the male foot. And when we see the ACL injuries that are happening, it's a massive...
That's why we've won one at home.
Right. Which is a horrible statistic. And it's like, how are these things all linked? And then what I'm really interested in as well is like the fandom aspect. And I know Julie spoke on a panel on Wednesday in terms of what Angel City has been building and the kind of replicating what the Lakers had been doing in the 80s of like why people are showing up to games might be to see Magic, right? But it might also be to see Jack Nicholson on the sideline. Like people are arriving to games for different reasons. And Angel City is a perfect example of creating a holistic experience for every type of fan. So for Elysian Park, it's like, how do we harness this momentum where women's sports at the professional level is kind of that the North Star, like the media attention, the headline grabber, but it's like, what are the other startups in the rooms, the entrepreneurs in the rooms that are building products and services for the whole gamut of women and sports? So that's kind of the impetus for why we've really invested in this space and continue to get excited about this space and have broadened that definition.
I'm going to go right back to you on that. Because you're enabled by the ownership group of the Dodgers and several other teams, tell us a little bit about the process of working with these organizations and how your investments there ultimately can benefit the team and vice versa.
Yeah, so our ownership group owns the Dodgers, has a stake in the Lakers, owns the Sparks, just recently bought Chelsea as kind of like the major notable investments on our ownership group. And it's like ways in which we engage, whether that's when we're initially want to just get market analysis, like, hey, what are you guys seeing? Whether that's on the performance side, the ticketing side, sponsorship side, like what are you looking for? What solutions are you looking for? What are you currently using? Where are kind of like those gaps in the market, as well as kind of like pipeline or diligence for like us, if we see a new opportunity and we're able to kind of contact those professional teams and leagues, like, hey, is this interesting to you? Like, is this worth it? Is this something an athlete would use? Like, they actually have that real world experience of using it. And for us, a big part of like our diligence process of evaluating a new opportunity is how can we lean in and provide help? And so some products and services are core sports technology where their end client is the team or the league, and that is how they generate revenue. Others, they're going to the mass market, and it's like a connection partnership with a team or a league might be awesome branding, might be an awesome kind of like PR hit, but their end consumer are the ones that are showing up in the stadiums, the ones watching on TV. So in terms of like our relationship with the teams and leagues, there's no set copy and paste model. We just have a really good working relationship, continue to have open communication of like, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what you guys are seeing. How can we work together and make sure that sports are continuing to innovate and move forward?
Can I ask a quick question? Who here played sports growing up at any point? And who thinks they benefited from that? I think that's a huge demographic. And as you're analyzing it and as we're looking at it in terms of growth on our end and investment, you learn how to communicate, you learn how to lead, you learn how to win and lose probably. You learn how to be a teammate. All of those things are hugely valuable. And you see it actually, like you look at all these crazy stats that a lot of which Sports Innovation Lab has pulled that say, hey, most executives played sports because they understand they're competitive. They have that drive. They understand the need for practice and grit and time. And I think that that's something too when you look at like the community in general and getting buy-in not only from players and fans, but everyone has a connection to that. Everyone learned those things somewhere. And if they didn't, maybe it's because they didn't have access to sport, and how do we work on that together? Like there's those pieces I think that even just when you were talking, I was like, it's an interesting thing. You think about it. If you're a player, you think about things that are in the market, what are helping to provide access, because there's a lot of different pieces of that. Whether if you're an athlete, if you don't have food, you cannot play. If you are a young girl and you can't afford a sports bra, you also can't play, or you can't get to the field because you don't have transportation. There's a lot of kind of things that align that within the tech world and the startup world and the venture world that are really focusing in on some of those issues that, yes, are relevant to sport and will continue to grow women's sports, absolutely, but also overall society and equity and inclusion across the board. So I think that it's something you said just made me think about how when you're approaching kind of, you can have sports companies and then you have things that are not necessarily sports specific, but align very easily with the growth of not only women's sports, but just sports in the U.S. And accessible sports in the U.S.
Yeah, and I look at my own journey of like, as Anthony mentioned, I played college basketball, but in terms of, I recognize I'm really fortunate. So the same year that I was born, the WNBA played their first game. So I'm in a privileged position where I always had a North Star of a professional league. And that has completely shifted the way in which I grew up and how I my actual goals of where I wanted to be, because I was able to see it. But now kind of like, I always joke that I'm a washed up athlete. And so like even the evolution of how I train and how I work out has evolved. So in terms of the technologies that are people are building really important companies that are servicing all different stages of an athlete and a broad definition of what an athlete is, from that first early stages of like beginning fandom of like when you get excited and you go to your first Angel City game to potentially playing at whatever level you're playing at, and then post career, what does your retirement look like? So definitely kind of that broad spectrum of evolution of my own personal experience.
Yeah, one note on that too, I would say one of our owners actually, it got approved by the league this morning, so I can legally say this. The founder and one of the creators of Topgolf is one of our owners. And it was interesting. We were talking to him last week, and he was saying that they have a stat now from the last PGA Tour that 10% of all professional golfers started playing golf at Topgolf because it is cheaper than buying clubs. And they had programs to have access for high school kids. And so you think about, particularly during the pandemic, as things have shifted in society, college experience has shifted, being on a team has shifted, access to that's something that was venture backed that Callaway bought, that is tech, that made access to a lot of that. So I think it's something that you're seeing a lot of overlap. And as you're seeing some of this innovation, whether it's something as simple as, hey, we're going to do a golf simulation, it actually has a long-term impact on professional sports because you can't be something that you've never seen. Or that you don't have access to. So, as you're saying with the WNBA, I think it's something too that as the tech continues to grow, the market continues to grow, because if I can't shoot basketball at all, which like both my husband and Erin can attest to, who both play college basketball, that I'm not going to be a fan if I don't have a connection to the game. But if I can go have a great experience at, Dave and Buster's or whatever, and have fun or have a community or have whatever, there's so much more buy-in. And that buy-in, not to be a capitalist, but leads to revenue. And then that revenue becomes someone that's recurring. It's a lifelong fan. You're also going to have a story and connection to that in a way that you wouldn't. So even to something as like a Topgolf or like a Toka, which is like a soccer one, like getting to have access to those kinds of like technology that you wouldn't really think about necessarily are in the traditional sports space, it's huge.
Yeah, and storytelling is a big part of that. And one of your investments is in Together. Talk us through that journey.
For office.
So in terms of the Trailblazer Venture Studio, one of the companies that we invested in was Together. So that's Alex Morgan, Sue Bird, Simone Manuel, and Chloe Kim's media company, focused on telling the storytelling of female athletes and women's sports more broadly. And so this is my own experience of like, women consume sports differently from men. And I don't want to make that as a full generalization, but just as you consume sports differently than you do. And it's like why you're watching the game, what you're looking at when you're watching the game, what you're following on social media, like whether you're looking on ESPN and following kind of like SportsCenter Top 10, or if you're on their social channels and seeing what the latest post is. Everyone's experience is different. And so Together is really focused on amplifying the women's sports storytelling, which I think is a massive reason why like the NCAA March Madness women's numbers were so high because there was real storytelling. There was a rivalry building. There was personalities. And it's like the product on the court has always been there, but the narrative around it and the media cycles were starting to pick up and realize, oh, there's added value where we can get more eyeballs and more people will be engaged. So that's why we invested in together, and really excited about that opportunity of what they're actually building and the importance. And I'm sure you can speak to kind of like what that's meant for Angel City as you guys have continued, even before you guys launched the played a game, the amount of storytelling and fandom that was built around what you guys were building captured a full audience.
Yeah, no, I think Elysian Park's done an amazing job of really kind of finding the winners and leaders in that space. So been amazing to see. But no, Together is a great example. Just Women's Sports is another example. And there's kind of other ones popping up all over the board.
The Gist.
The Gist.
We're investors in The Gist as well, which is also a media outlet which covers all men and women's sports, but caters towards more of a women's audience. In terms of the tone, the storytelling, also equal coverage of men and women. So even your there's a few times a week a newsletter goes out and it's like, it's going to be equal. And you don't even I'm like, wow, the fact that this isn't the norm in other publications is wild to me. But yeah, big supporters of what they're building.
I subscribe to their daily. It's pretty good. And their monthly as well. So media companies, that's media as tech is one example. I have a question for you. Speaking to the founders in the room, what is on your wish list of sports technology solutions that can either elevate the quality of care you provide to your athletes, elevate the experience for your fans, or make Angel City more profitable in general? Because that's always good.
A way to slow down time would be great, to create more of that as my first ask. I think everyone here, I'm sure, can relate to that. It comes down to resources. Everything you do, you have to allocate resources, whether it's time, people, money, or technology. So being able to kind of have the equation of what that looks like is something that is always going to be dynamic and fluctuating. For us, the media rights deal is up this year for us, which is great. And we have big names around the table, and it will be significantly bigger than it has been in the past because of the proof of concept that they have the numbers, that if people are showing up, they're watching. I think for us, it's, again, a lot of it is access and understanding of the community, because so much of, again, to your point about storytelling, the only reason that I think we were successful is because we had 2 years to understand what LA meant, what they wanted. We got the buy-in of the community. We invested in them and they invested in us in that way. So not even just in terms of actual ownership of our ownership group, but in terms of actual, we did 400 events in the community. We went to basically every club at Surf or Breakers, or if you have kids, any of those, we were probably at your practice with a weird tent handing out stickers being like, hey, women's soccer is a thing. And also we're going to be here in 2 years. This is why you should come. I think if there's a way to figure out, there's got to be a better system than that probably. Nothing will beat grassroots, don't get me wrong, but being able to have kind of those touch points and understanding where the gaps are. We learned, for example, McKinsey did a study about the number one reason that young girls stop playing sports is because they can't afford a sports bra, which sucks. And so we were like, great, how do we work on that? And so being able to find partners that are aligned and say, hey, we care about, access to sports. So we went to Nike and said, hey, for every seat deposit we do, what if you guys gave a sports bra to a young girl in LA? And we got out 22,000, which was great. And Nike was, I think, pleasantly surprised. But I think you get that buy-in too, because when people spend money with brands, and I think that if there's a way to be able to have some sort of OKR or track against it, or the TAM is totally different than most, just sports markets. It's people are investing in coming to games or watching things on Together, doing these different things because they believe in the people behind it and the storytelling that's around it. It's not because they necessarily want to play the sport themselves. So you're seeing, like I said, a very different approach. I think if there's a way to make it so that one of our big growth initiatives is how do we become more global, more than a game. And for you look the Warriors, only 6% of their fans ever get to go to a game. So how do you get to build that community, particularly for women's sports? Because the infrastructure is just not there. We have 9 different players on 9 different, or 12 players that are on 9 different national teams. We have the youngest Japanese player. How are we tapping into that market? How are we making sure that her family, friends at home have access to the same things that we do? And also that they can read the press release and watch the videos and understand and have translators. Like, I think making sure that you're really understanding the localized markets. There's just no, to what you were saying even about shoes, there's just not data for women's sports. And I think that that's something that it's really lacking. Sports Innovation Lab is obviously at the forefront of that. But it takes time and it takes investment. And I think if I had to say like the biggest things, it would be that. And then also from the medical side, like why we are so far behind in terms of analyzing women's bodies. Every rule of every sport is made for a man's body. Women are 9 times more likely to tear their ACL in basketball or soccer. That is the fact. And that is brutal. And it has ended a lot of careers. And when you have such an excellent product, how do you protect that? Because an injured player is a lot more expensive for a team too. So I think getting to be more diligent about the research that's going into not only sports, but how do we, make sure we're not setting people up for failure or to get hurt. And that starts when they're young. Because also you think of from like people that are going to college, get to have like that whole say, like get to play sports in general, have access to it. How are we making things more inclusive in general? And then having the longevity kind of preclude that. I think that was a lot of different pieces, so apologies. There's a lot to work on, so hopefully you guys are all ready. But I think the upside is there. The audience is there. I mean, more than 50% of the country are women. And also they control most of the household spending. So it's worthwhile if you can understand that audience and you can adhere to them. And people also spend money on things they believe in. They're not going to, it's different. It's changed over time. You're not going to, this is a bad example. I hate the Yankees. Like, I'm not going to give money to the Yankees. I think there's same with Jerry Jones. Like, he's not my favorite person. Like, I'm not going to give money to him.
Not either. I'm a Red Sox fan, so that's just day one stuff right there.
But like to that point, like people care about the people behind things now. They care about what brands you associate with. They care about the products you're working with. We have like this great product that we invested in essentially that provides after every game, it uploads all the pictures from all the press and it tags all of them, and the athletes can just go in and then they have access to all the pictures that were taken of them for themselves, for their own brand, for assets. They get to start to build out that kind of portfolio. Like there's stuff like that that's really smart that has popped up that also will continue to help grow the space overall. But I think that, again, the tech is just behind it. It hasn't been focused on women. That was a long-winded.
Outstanding. What tech are you eyeing over Elysian right now?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah,
right
it is.
there.
Insider info.
Well, it's interesting. So I have the privilege of where I sit to work really closely with a bunch of our managing partners at the firm, and each of them kind of have their own focus areas. And so that ranges from, our broad definition of what we invest in is sports plus. So the intersection of where sports intersect with massive emerging markets. So that's culture, health, tech, commerce. And so when we think about culture and like the cultural relevance of the athletes and their impact on fashion and collectibles and like what that actually looks like. But me personally, obviously women's sports more broadly, but how, again, forgive me for repeating myself, but that the athlete side, the fan side, and then the growth, which is like that media side of women's sports more broadly. And I'm really interested in like that fan side. So women as fans, because you had mentioned like in terms of 50% of the population, but it's also like 50% of the folks that are walking into a stadium at Dodger Stadium, or your NFL fans are just about 50% women. And so it's like how there's an untapped revenue opportunity. I don't know what that solution looks like. So if you guys have it, let me know. But it's just recognizing, like really understanding there's a community building aspect, but it's also, again, kind of recognizing who is your end consumer. And unfortunately, I think there's been an end consumer that has been overlooked, that wants to lean in and wants to be seen. And once seen as Angel City of what they've built is like, oh, wow, they're willing to spend, they're willing to engage, they're willing to bring their friends to the games from a massive opportunity. So some certain things that we're looking at in terms of just another area that's really interesting to us is what we've coined human awesomeness. So again, it's this holistic view of what human performance is. As I had spoken about my own personal experience, like I trained at a relatively elite-ish level, but now in post-career, what does my performance look like when I'm training? I'm starting to teach myself that I don't need to be in pain every time I work out. that's something that I'm still trying to overcome. But it's like, if I want sustainability to be my goal and longevity to be my goals have shifted. And now the way in which I work out needs to shift as well. So recovery and sleep become so important, nutrition of what I'm putting into my body. And all of this is relevant from a very young age, of the first time that you're even like walking and working out, and like making sure it's a fun experience, all the way through again to like the position I'm in of like washed up and achy. So again, holistic view of performance, recovery, and the like, which one of our managing partners had coined human awesomeness, which I think is really relevant, especially as we think about women at the focal point.
Thank you so much. I want to open it up to Q&A right now. Who's got one? David, should I get you the mic? I'll walk the mic over to you.
So if you think about how like men watch sports, there's this whole thing about they're side by side and they're not talking and they're watching something this way. How is it different for women? Like, what is that experience like, and how does that affect what you all are looking at in terms of Angel City, or in terms of investments, in terms of women's viewing patterns and how they enjoy sports?
I think it's probably more similar than you think. 54% of our base are women for fans. I think people are like, oh, it's probably like the soccer mom. Nope, it's a lot of like straight white dudes hanging out with their bros, which, you know, you need to have everyone. And so I think there's a spot for everyone. It's about creating a place that feels safe and inclusive for any of those experiences, whether you want to sit there in silence and just anxiously pant, or you want to ignore the game. Like probably 25% of our fans are watching the game if they're having a bad time. They are there because they get to drink iced coffee with their friends, and they get to hit the drums, and they get to hang out. So like I said, I think that particularly on the women's side, I'd like to think we do a better job of making sure that there's spaces for everyone. So yes, I would say generally people are still going to sit there and watch, but we also make sure that we have stuff before the game. So stuff for kids, a bar. We have also like nursing rooms, stuff that maybe people wouldn't have thought of originally. Or like one thing we realized is, again, accessibility is a huge thing. So we partnered with the Metro. If you have a ticket, you can get on the Metro for free. And so worked with them and said, hey, also, if you feel unsafe, we invested to pay more to have wayfinders and extra lights from, to the stadium. So I think it's not even necessarily about how you watch the game. I think that the nice thing, particularly about soccer, and it may be different for other games, is like that 90 minutes is pretty pure. And it is, we take that pretty seriously. Don't get me wrong, we have 6 supporter groups, and they stand the whole time and they drum and sing, whether we're down by 4 or we're up by 5. They don't care. And so the fact that that's an option is catering towards a fan base, which is great. And that's something that you see that on the men's side, particularly in Europe. And if you've been to an LAFC game, you've seen the 32-52. We also have that. I would say their songs are a little more clever, but other than that, it's pretty similar. But I think making sure that you have all the pieces to make it feel like it's like, I don't want people going out and being like, wow, that was such a great like women's game. Like that was such a good women's sports experience. I want them to walk and be like, that was fucking awesome. Like I'm coming back. Like I'm going to bring my friends. And then when I bring them, they're going to sit next to me and be like, wow, that was amazing. And I'm going to feel like I was right. And so every game is someone's first game. And so I think for us, it's you really have to think about it in that capacity and say, hey, we need to invest in this. We're going to make sure that it's a show, but also the people that, again, want to sit there with their friends and not talk, that's an option. There's places for them. There's places for, I saw a section this past week make a little girl move because she came in and the other team scored twice. And then they were like, you have to leave. And she was 10. And I was like, this is pretty vicious. So you get that. And I think, again, people like sports, they're competitive, they like good products. And when they feel the buy-in, you have a space for everyone. And I think the main difference between our game and maybe like an LAFC game is it's not necessarily the overall experience of watching or interacting and having access to the soccer piece of it. It's more of like, do we have food for everyone? Can everyone get there? Are they safe? Like, is there a place that if somebody is, really anxious that they can go and there's no sensory, like we don't have a light show without warning, like just like trying to be really cognizant of that and making sure that, there is something for everyone. So like, actually, I'll give a quick example, and this will hopefully be a buy-in for any of you guys to come to the game that we have next at home. Also, Sydney LaRue will be back, which will be great, so we can start winning. And Amandine Henry will be here. So Alyssa Thompson, who I don't know if any of you know, is the star of like one of the young stars of the women's national team. She's 18. She goes to Harvard Westlake. She just graduated this week. She's like one of the first people to forego college. She gave up Stanford. She was the first round draft pick. Whole ordeal. She was also, her and her sister were the first two NIL athletes ever that Nike gave money to. Crazy. She's unbelievable. Because she's 18, she is still in high school. She missed her prom because it was the same day as a game, which is objectively hilarious. But we realized that a lot of our fans, and so this is kind of comes to like, what's the difference, I think a little bit too about that experience is like, we took the time to talk to our fans about that and be like, oh, like, so like all the players dress up as prom. And then we realized that we have a really big like LGBTQ population. We have people that are from abroad. LA is such a melting pot. Like what if for Pride or just in general, we did prom for all? Like what if we did a redo prom? Because not everyone got to have that good experience. And it started because Alyssa missed hers. But now the Pride game on the 25th against Houston is prom for all. We made like tuxedo shirts and it's like this whole new bit. So I think that women's teams, particularly in the front office, do a better job of listening to fans and being like, what do they actually like want to engage with? And I mean, we'll sell it out, not just because it should be a good game, but because people love to dress up. They love a theme. They love to feel seen. They love to have something that's inclusive, that they were thought about intentionally. It's like, just, I think the little things like that, that's really about storytelling. And that's something that women do exceptionally well.
Yeah, I would have just asked too, like, I mean, you had mentioned and gave me that visual of like you and your friends sitting next to each other. And like, I don't know, like ever how she watches a game and how I watch a game, like is going to be different. One if we're together and one if we're not together. But one thing that brought to mind is like sports betting and like the socialization and the storytelling, the pregame show, that post-game show, which previously didn't exist in women's sports and is slowly starting to, we're continuing to push for that. It used to be like, oh, game's on, game's over. There's no analyst breaking it down. There's no nothing. So it's like the other tangible things about ways in which just people in general engage with sports, whether it's men's sports or women's sports, a man as a fan or a woman as a fan. Those are just kind of like the barriers to entry. One thing that we had done this year during March Madness, I forced everyone on our team to participate in the women's and men's like office pool, for fill out a bracket for the men's side, fill out a bracket for the women's side. And it's a way to incentivize them. Now they want to track what are the scores? What are the games? How did Angel Reese do? Like who won what game? And they're tuning in. They're tuning in to Sacred Heart versus Stanford. And I'm giving them crap about us winning for a short time in the beginning. But it's ways in which those folks can engage with the sport. So again, the sports betting comes to mind on the women's side.
One thing within women's sports is, for the founders in this room, low barrier to entry. If you can build it and dream it, you could kind of become it. Is that how it goes? Yeah, anyways, we have a little exclusive here. This just dropped. They call it fresh wax, sealed wax. NWSL trading cards was just launched 2 days ago. The new Parkside ones. And here they are, nice and sparkling. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pop these open, and everybody in the crowd is going to get some too. So
This is good because the World Cup is this year also, in case anyone didn't know that.
Yeah, they already sold out over 1 million tickets and are on track to beat the 2015 record in terms of in-fan attendance.
While you're doing that, one thing I would say too, just about kind of proof of concept in like the women's sports side, especially with the fact that there's some fun NWSL stuff here. The league has changed a lot. Oh, Junendo.
Oh,
Tom's favorite player. But you're seeing, again, all these different national team players that are going to be at the World Cup. It's going to be the biggest it's ever been. Great, amazing. But also even interested in terms of our league and speaking to the fact that you're looking at real venture investment. I would say quasi confidentially, like we paid less than $5 million for expansion fee. There were not a lot of bids to be in our league. This is 3 years ago. There were now 88 bids for this last spot, and San Francisco paid $54 million. That is pretty significant, and there are multiple teams that are going to be paying that and more. So you're seeing the investment come in, and that's coming from 6th Street. That's coming from like real kind of validation. You're starting to really see the numbers kind of pick up because people see the upside. So it's not going away, and it's cool to again see that kind of validated and number, and get to see new pieces kind of come out, and how do we continue to grow these players in the game. But more teams are coming in, and it's definitely growing.
And Parkside story is really interesting. Got located in Sherman Oaks, had nothing to do with the sports industry at all. Saw the rise in women's sports, saw a need for something that he was interested in about 2 years ago, and now here they are. And they have licensed trading cards that's on stage with Kari, right? So close to the source. It's not always going to be like this. So if you have an idea, just get going. So there it is. And that's pretty good on time. Thank you to everybody to coming and listening. Smooth. Kari, Erin, thank you so much for joining us.